Ever feel like you're speaking a totally different language than your partner? Like you're from Earth and they're from, well, another planet.
Uh-huh, I know that feeling.
Today we're diving deep into a book that claims to have cracked the code of understanding the opposite sex. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus.
Ugh, a classic.
It's helped millions navigate the crazy world of love and relationships. And guess what? We might just uncover some secrets to more fulfilling relationships along the way.
That's the goal.
But before we get to those juicy Martian and Venusian secrets, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more deep dives like this one.
Yes, subscribe so you don't miss out.
Okay, back to the book. The author, John Gray, is a certified family therapist and relationship expert, so he knows his stuff.
Oh yeah, he's helped tons of couples.
And his central metaphor, men from Mars, women from Venus, is simple but so powerful, right? It's like, duh.
Yeah.
Of course, we sometimes feel like we're from different planets.
Right. Men and women, we're wired differently. We communicate, handle stress, even our emotional needs. They're all different.
Totally. It's like that whole Mr. Fix-It versus the Home Improvement Committee thing.
Classic example. Men, those Martians, they love to solve problems.
They hear an issue and they're like, okay, got to fix it.
Exactly, like a mechanic troubleshooting a car. But women, they often just want to connect emotionally.
Yeah, to share their feelings and know they're being heard, not necessarily fixed.
Exactly.
It reminds me of this time my boyfriend and I got totally lost on a road trip. He was stressing about finding the right route on the map, going full-on Mars mode.
I bet.
And I just wanted to vent about being lost. I even tried suggesting detours, thinking I was being helpful.
Uh-oh.
But he took it as me questioning his navigation skills.
Ooh, yeah, that Mars-Venus clash in action. He was all about the practical solution, getting back on track while you were looking for emotional support.
Totally. And that's where those well-intentioned but totally unhelpful Mr. Fix-It phrases come in.
Oh, tell me about it. You shouldn't worry so much, or it's not a big deal.
Ugh, worse.
Those phrases just shut down a woman's feelings.
They make you feel dismissed, like you're overreacting.
Completely misunderstood.
So how do we bridge this communication gap? Have you ever found yourself jumping into problem-solving mode when your partner just needed a listening ear?
Oh, all the time. I think it's a pretty common Martian tendency.
It's definitely something I've noticed in my own relationships.
It's all about self-awareness, I think. Recognizing those Martian or Venusian tendencies so we can, adjust our communication style.
Makes sense. So men got to learn to pause, listen empathetically.
Offer support before jumping into fix-it mode.
And women maybe be more direct about needing that emotional validation.
Right, instead of expecting their partner to magically understand.
Because let's face it, men aren't exactly mind readers.
No, they are not. And speaking of differences, Gray talks about how men and women handle stress totally differently too.
Right. The whole men go to their caves, women talk thing.
Exactly. Stressed man retreats to process things internally. It's his cave, his alone time.
Like my dad hiding out in his workshop when he's had a bad day.
Exactly. But a stressed woman, she wants to talk it out, connect.
It's her way to de-stress, get support.
Absolutely. It's like their way of processing those emotions.
But that's where things can get tricky. Picture a woman trying to connect with her stressed out partner who's gone into his cave.
Mm-hmm.
She's going to feel ignored, maybe even rejected.
Right. But he's just coping in his own way, his Martian way.
Classic miscommunication.
Totally. It's like that example in the book with Jim. He unwinds by reading the newspaper after a tough day. His wife thinks he's ignoring her, but he's just trying to relax, de-stress.
It's all about understanding those different coping mechanisms. Think about how you deal with a stressful day. Do you retreat to your cave or seek out connection?
It's a good question to ask yourself.
Knowing your own patterns and your partner's can prevent a lot of unnecessary arguments.
So much unnecessary drama.
And speaking of avoiding conflict, Gray dives into another important topic, understanding the core needs of the opposite sex.
Oh yeah, this is big. He says men need to feel trusted and competent.
Makes sense.
And women need to feel cherished and appreciated.
It's all about speaking the right love language.
Exactly. And recognizing that overgiving, especially for women, can lead to resentment and burnout.
It's about finding that balance between giving and receiving.
Absolutely. It's not all on one person.
Gray even tells this story about Susan and Jim, this couple in counseling, because Susan felt totally drained from giving too much. They had to learn to recognize those unhealthy patterns and start communicating their needs better.
Communication is key.
And let me tell you, communication is a huge theme in this book.
Makes sense, right? It's the foundation of any relationship.
Gray says men and women literally speak different languages.
Like they're from different planets.
It's not just the words, it's their whole thought process and how they express themselves.
It's like they have different dictionaries and grammar rules.
It's like that classic example where a woman says, "We never go out."
Uh-oh, I know where this is going.
And the man hears, "You're boring and you never take me anywhere."
When really what she means is,
I want to spend quality time with you and do something fun together.
exactly. Totally different interpretations.
Gray even has this Venusian Martian phrase dictionary to help decode these common communication mishaps.
Oh, I love that.
For example, "I'm fine" in Venusian often means,
I'm not fine, but I don't want to burden you with my feelings.
and "do whatever you want" actually translates to.
Please consider my feelings and make a decision that takes them into account.
It's like you're trying to solve a complex math problem with a kid's counting book.
Eh.
Have you ever felt like you were speaking a different language than your partner?
Absolutely. Who hasn't?
This Mars-Venus perspective might just help you decipher those mixed signals.
It's a whole new way of looking at things.
And speaking of communication styles, Gray says men are like rubber bands when it comes to intimacy.
Now that's an analogy I'm curious about.
What's the deal with the rubber band theory? Fill me in.
Well, Gray says men have this inherent need to pull away sometimes and then spring back closer.
So, not a sign of disinterest.
Nope. Not rejection at all. It's more like a built-in need for some space.
Like they need to recharge their emotional batteries.
Exactly. They pull away and then they come back, ready to reconnect.
Interesting. So it's not that they're losing interest, they're just stretching.
You got it.
Makes sense. Gray talks about this couple, Sandra and Larry, married for 20 years. Sandra kept trying to get Larry to open up, but he'd withdraw.
Classic Mars move.
It was only when she understood this rubber band analogy that she realized he just needed some space. She learned to give him that space, knowing he'd come back around.
Sometimes the best thing you can do is just give them space.
It seems counterintuitive, but it makes sense. But hold on, women aren't just sitting around waiting for the rubber band to snap back, right?
Of course not. They have their own emotional cycles.
That's right. Women are like waves.
Up and down.
Experiencing those emotional highs and lows.
And those down times, when the wave crashes, that's when they need extra support.
They're not being dramatic or needy.
It's just their natural emotional rhythm.
And before we go any further, I just got to remind our amazing viewers to hit that subscribe button to stay tuned for more deep dives like this.
Yeah, don't miss out.
Okay, now back to those emotional waves. Gray tells this story about Chris and Pam to illustrate this concept.
Yeah, Chris is successful, financially well off, but he wasn't fulfilling Pam's emotional needs.
Ouch.
It was only when he understood this wave analogy that he realized money can't fix everything.
Sometimes you just need a hug and a listening ear.
Exactly. Sometimes what a woman needs most is to just be held and heard as she rides those emotional waves.
Such a powerful reminder that emotional needs are totally different from material needs.
You can't buy happiness.
And it brings us back to the idea of giving the right kind of love.
Right, because even with the best intentions, giving the wrong kind can actually make things worse.
It's like speaking the wrong language.
It is. Remember those core needs we talked about? Men, they want to feel trusted. Women, they want to feel cherished.
Right.
So if you give a man tons of advice when he's just trying to figure things out on his own...
You can feel like you don't trust him.
Exactly. And if you shower a woman with gifts when what she craves is quality time and emotional connection...
She's going to feel empty.
Exactly. It's about speaking the right love language for your partner's needs.
And that's where Gray's analogy of the knight in shining armor comes in. He talks about this knight who keeps trying to rescue the princess with his sword.
Oh, I love this analogy.
But what she really needs is a rope to pull her out of a well.
He's speaking sword, but she needs rope.
It's all about understanding what your partner truly needs and responding accordingly.
It's about meeting them where they are.
And even with the best intentions, sometimes we mess up. That's why Gray had this whole checklist of common mistakes each gender makes and how those actions can make their partner feel unloved.
It's like a relationship troubleshooting guide.
And it's not just about those grand gestures, it's about those small acts of love, too.
Right. The little things matter, like remembering to pick up the dry cleaning or taking out the trash.
Those everyday things can actually score big points in a relationship.
It's about being thoughtful and attentive.
And Gray says that while both men and women value those small acts of love, they actually perceive and give points differently.
Different scoring systems.
Like they're playing different games. He tells this funny story about Chuck and Pam. Chuck, a successful doctor, learns to score points with Pam by doing those small, thoughtful things. Even though his work was super demanding, he made the effort.
Because he understood that those small gestures went a long way.
It's all about recognizing that every act of love counts, no matter how small.
Consistency is key.
And get this, Gray provides a whopping 101 ways to score points with the opposite sex.
Oh, I gotta check that out.
It's this treasure trove of practical, romantic, even humorous ideas to keep that love tank full.
That's awesome.
From bringing home flowers to giving it a back rub to simply listening attentively. It's those consistent gestures of love that speak volumes.
It's the thought that counts.
But even with all the scoring points in the world, those difficult feelings are bound to surface in any relationship, right? It's just part of life.
Definitely. Relationships aren't always sunshine and roses.
And that's where Gray introduces this love letter technique, his secret weapon for communicating those tricky emotions.
I've heard about this. It's about expressing feelings safely and constructively.
Right. You write a letter to your partner, pouring out all your hurts and needs. But here's the catch.
You don't send it.
Exactly.
Oh, wow. I can see how that would be therapeutic.
The act of writing itself helps you process your feelings without putting your partner on the defensive.
It's like a release valve for all those pent-up emotions.
Exactly.
So you're saying write this emotional letter and then just stuff it in a drawer.
Pretty much. It's not about blaming or attacking your partner.
It's about understanding and owning your own emotions.
Exactly. And Gray really emphasizes the importance of identifying those deeper feelings, the ones that are really driving your reactions.
It's like peeling back the layers of an onion to get to the core of the issue.
But what happens after you write the letter? Do you just, sit there and wallow in your feelings?
Not exactly. Gray suggests writing a response letter from your partner's perspective.
Wait, so you're pretending to be your partner and responding to your own letter?
Yeah. It
Yeah.
sounds kind of crazy, but it's actually really insightful. It helps you see things from their point of view.
It's like having a virtual relationship counselor in your head, helping you work through those tough emotions.
It's all about building empathy.
But before we dive into the deeper emotional depths of Gray's insights,
Uh-oh, cliffhanger?
we got to remind our viewers to subscribe to our channel for more deep dives like this.
Yes, subscribe and stay tuned for more.
And we're back. Continuing our Martian-Venusian adventure with Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. Before the break, we were talking about that love letter technique and how it can really help you process those tough emotions.
Right. But it's not just about venting on paper, is it? Nope, not at all. It goes way deeper than that. Gray says those old hurts we carry, especially from childhood, can really mess with our relationships. It's like they come back to haunt us.
So all those times I overreacted when my ex was late, maybe that wasn't really about him being late at all.
Exactly. It could be that those old wounds, like feeling neglected or unimportant, are getting triggered. So something happens in the present, but it brings up all those old feelings from the past.
Wow. So that big fight about the dishes might actually be about, a deep-seated fear of not feeling appreciated, something that goes all the way back to childhood.
You got it. It's almost like those old emotional tapes start playing,
Yeah.
and we react as if we're right back in that childhood situation, even if what's happening now is, pretty minor.
That's crazy. So instead of blaming our partner for triggering those feelings, we should be looking inward, recognizing those old wounds that are messing with us.
Exactly. It's about taking responsibility for our own emotional baggage. Your partner might trigger those feelings, but they're not responsible for healing them. That's on us.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do we actually do that? In the middle of an argument, I can't exactly call a timeout and analyze my childhood, right?
Haha, right. It's more about building awareness over time. But when you do feel those big emotions coming up, try to hit pause before you react. Ask yourself, what's really going on here? Is this about the dishes, or is something deeper being triggered?
So taking a moment to check in with myself.
Exactly. And remembering that your partner, even if they triggered those feelings, isn't the enemy.
It's more about, extending grace to each other.
Exactly. Knowing that we all have those tender spots. And sometimes just acknowledging those past hurts can be a huge step towards healing.
It's like saying to your inner child, hey, I see you, and it's okay to feel these things.
Exactly. And when you can approach those tough conversations with that kind of compassion, it makes a world of difference for both of you. But even when you're aware of all this stuff, those old patterns can still sneak up on you. It's like they have a mind of their own.
Oh, tell me about it. It's so frustrating.
Right. And that's where this idea of a delayed reaction response comes in. Gray says sometimes you can get exactly what you wanted and then bam! Those negative feelings from the past just come out of nowhere. It's weird.
Wait, so you're saying, like, let's say you've been wanting to go on a romantic vacation and your partner finally books it, but then instead of being happy, you start picking fights and feeling resentful.
Exactly. It makes no sense logically, but emotionally, it's like those unresolved hurts from the past are rearing their ugly heads. It can be super confusing for both people.
So it's like your subconscious is saying, see, it's too little, too late.
It is, and it can really sabotage your happiness. But the good news is that once you recognize these patterns, you can start to break free.
Okay, but how do we do that? It feels like we're up against our own brains.
It starts with awareness. When you feel those delayed reactions happening, try to see them as clues. Those are signals that those old emotional wounds need some attention.
So those emotional alarm bells are going off. Time to do some inner work.
Exactly. And that might mean journaling, therapy, or even just having a compassionate conversation with yourself about those hurts.
Okay, I'm getting this. So it's a process, right? It takes time and effort to work through those old wounds.
Definitely. It's a journey, not a destination. And relationships have their ups and downs too.
Oh, yeah. They're not always a walk in the park.
Right. Gray talks about the different seasons of love. He says it's like nature. You can't expect constant sunshine and blooming flowers. There will be storms. There will be times when things feel a bit dormant.
So if you're in that summer phase of love, enjoy the sunshine. But remember that relationships need tending too.
Right, like a garden. You got to weed out those communication mishaps, water those emotional needs, make sure you're both getting what you need to thrive.
And when winter comes, when things feel a bit distant or disconnected, it doesn't mean love has died. It's just taking a different form.
Like nature, relationships need time to regenerate too.
I love that analogy. And it reminds us that just like spring always follows winter, those feelings of connection will come back around.
It's all about trusting that natural ebb and flow.
And sometimes, just like a garden could use a little help from an expert, we might need some outside support too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Whether that's couples therapy, a workshop, or even just talking to a trusted friend.
Sometimes an outside perspective can be so helpful.
Definitely. And remember, we're all works in progress. We're going to make mistakes, have moments of disconnection. It's all part of being human.
And being in a relationship.
Exactly. The key is to approach those challenges with compassion. Be willing to learn and grow, both as individuals and as a couple.
And to remember that those differences, those Martian and Venusian quirks, they're not a bad thing. They can actually make the relationship more interesting, more vibrant.
It's about celebrating those differences.
Right. Relationships should be fun. And Gray reminds us that laughter and playfulness, they're important too.
Oh, yeah. Got to keep things light. You can't be serious all the time.
It's like a cosmic dance between Mars and Venus, right? A playful exploration of our differences, a celebration of all the ways we can love and support each other.
I love that. And speaking of support, Gray has some really practical tips for navigating communication pitfalls too, like those conversational patterns that just lead to arguments.
Oh yeah, we've all been there. Instead of launching into a list of complaints starting with "you always" or "you never," there's a better way.
Right. It's about expressing your needs in a way that invites connection, not conflict.
So focusing on the specific behavior that's bothering you, explaining how it makes you feel, and then clearly saying what you need from your partner.
It's like a recipe for healthy communication.
And just like a chef tastes the dish along the way, you need to check in with your partner too, make sure they're understanding what you're saying.
It's a two-way street.
And those I statements instead of you statements, they make a huge difference.
Oh, yeah. That's a game changer.
Instead of saying, "you never listen to me," try, "I feel unheard when." It takes the blame out of the equation.
And it puts the focus on your own experience.
Like taking ownership of your own feelings.
Exactly. But communication isn't just about expressing yourself clearly. It's about really listening to your partner, too. Trying to understand their perspective, responding with empathy.
So creating that safe space for open and honest dialogue.
Exactly. Where both of you feel comfortable sharing your feelings and needs. But don't forget the spice.
Ooh, the spice. Tell me more.
It's just as important to bring some playfulness and humor into the mix.
Right. Those lighthearted moments can really diffuse tension and remind you that you're on the same team.
Because at the end of the day, relationships are about connection, support, and shared joy.
Absolutely. Creating a life together that's both meaningful and fun.
And that's what it's all about. But before we wrap things up and hand it over to our awesome listeners, Gray introduces this one last mind-blowing concept, the 90-10 principle.
Okay, I got to hear about this. But before we dive in, quick reminder to our viewers to subscribe to our channel for more awesome deep dives just like this one.
Don't miss out. Hit that subscribe button.
Now back to that 90-10 principle. What's the deal?
Okay, so get this. Gray says that when you're feeling upset with your partner, 90% of that upset might actually be coming from your past, from those old wounds and patterns you brought into the relationship.
Hold on, wait a minute. So only 10% is actually about what's happening right now.
Yeah, it's a total game changer. It means that massive fight about forgetting to call, it could actually be tapping into some deep-seated insecurity about not being a priority, something that might go all the way back to, childhood.
Wow, okay, I'm starting to see how this 90-10 idea could be huge. But how do we actually put it into practice?
Yeah.
It seems pretty tricky to separate present frustrations from past baggage, especially when you're, in the heat of the moment.
It's all about building that self-awareness like we were talking about earlier. When those intense emotions hit, try hitting pause before you react. Instead of going straight to attack mode, take a breath and ask yourself, what's really going on here? Is this about something way deeper than what's happening on the surface?
It's like taking a step back to get some perspective. So instead of blaming my partner for how I'm feeling, I can, own my own emotional baggage.
Exactly. And remember, your partner might trigger those old wounds, but it's not their job to heal them. That's our work to do.
Makes sense. But how does this 90-10 principle actually help us, have better conversations?
Well, when you understand where those intense feelings are really coming from, you can approach those conversations with way more empathy and compassion.
It's about giving yourself and your partner a little grace. We all have those sensitive spots. And sometimes just acknowledging those past hurts can be really healing.
Like you were saying earlier, it's like comforting your inner child, saying, hey, I see you. It's okay to feel this way. And that validation can make a world of difference.
This is all so insightful. But let's be real, those old patterns, sometimes they're so ingrained they pop up even when we're trying our best. That's where Gray talks about the delayed reaction response, right?
Oh, yeah, the delayed reaction. It's a tricky one. Sometimes, even when we get exactly what we wanted, those negative feelings from the past can creep in and create this delayed reaction. It's like you finally get that romantic vacation you've been begging for.
And then once you're there, you find yourself picking fights.
Exactly. Or you feel resentful for no reason. It doesn't make sense logically, but emotionally, it's like those unhealed wounds from the past are messing with you.
It's almost like your subconscious is saying, too little, too late.
Exactly. It can be super confusing, and it can really sabotage your happiness. But the good news is, once you recognize it, you can start breaking free from these patterns.
Okay, so how do we actually do that? It feels like a battle against my own brain sometimes.
It's not about battling it, it's about understanding it. See those delayed reactions as clues, signals that those old emotional wounds need some attention.
Those emotional alarm bells are going off, telling us it's time to do some inner work.
Exactly. And that work might look different for everyone. It could be journaling, therapy, or even just having a kind and compassionate conversation with yourself about those hurts, exploring where they're coming from, why they're still affecting you.
Okay, got it. So it's a process. It takes time and effort to work through this stuff.
It does, but it's so worth it. And remember, relationships are a journey too.
They have their ups and downs, their seasons, just like life.
Exactly. And Gray's book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, it's like this amazing map for navigating that journey.
It reminds us that even though men and women might seem like they're from different planets, we can actually learn to understand each other. We could build those deeply fulfilling connections.
And isn't that what we all want? To feel loved, understood, and connected.
Absolutely. So if you're looking for a way to improve your relationships, to deepen your understanding of yourself and your partner, this book is a fantastic place to start.
It's a classic for a reason.
And on that note, we'll wrap up our deep dive into Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. Thanks for joining us on this Martian Venusian adventure. We hope you learned something new and maybe even had a few laughs along the way. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those love tanks full.